Next, a move to reinstate the death penalty in Delaware, and the outgoing governor's new budget isn't playing well. We'll tell you why. This is the Delaware Way. Welcome to the Delaware Way. I'm Larry Menti. In August of last year, the Delaware State Supreme Court ruled that the death penalty in Delaware is unconstitutional. And just last month, they said that applies retroactively to convicted cop killer Derek Powell. Here to talk about that is Senator Brian Pettyjohn, who is a Republican. It's an interesting time in the Senate. I'd like to talk about that in 1 second, but let's keep on this. Okay. You are against the ruling by the Supreme Court, I take it, on Derek Powell.
I disagree with the ruling of the state Supreme Court. The initial ruling that said the death penalty in Delaware is unconstitutional. But
specifically when it comes to Derek Powell.
Specifically when it comes to Derek Powell, I'm a resident of Georgetown. Chad Spicer, who was killed by Derek Powell, was a police officer in Georgetown. He was a Georgetown native, lived there his whole life. I knew him when he was a kid. I know his parents very well. So it's very deeply personal for me and for our community, for the community that I represent, that this cop killer now gets to live when Chad Spicer doesn't.
Life in prison.
Yeah.
He still has a pretty strict penalty, but you would love to see him put to death?
I would, yes. He took a public servant away from Georgetown, somebody who was there to protect the residents of Georgetown and to uphold the law, and he took that person's life away. And
I guess the question is, what can you do about it now?
Well, for this specific case, nothing. Even if we do pass a law that reinstates the death penalty in Delaware, he can't be resentenced. So Derek Powell will serve the rest of his life behind bars in the custody of the Department of Corrections.
And regardless. Will you be pushing for the death penalty to be reinstated?
Yes. We right now are looking at legislation crafted around the U.S. Supreme Court ruling with the Florida case that would pass constitutional muster from both the Delaware and U.S. Supreme Courts.
In what instances would you want the death penalty to be imposed?
Would really want it on very strict circumstances. Not necessarily with eyewitnesses have been proved to be unreliable. So there has to be very clear and convincing evidence, physical evidence, DNA, video surveillance, things like that are really incontrovertible in order to impose this ultimate penalty on somebody.
And you can put that in the legislation?
Yeah, that could be part of the legislation.
And you want it for any horrendous murders or any horrendous crimes, not just for police officers?
No matter who you murder, if you murder somebody in a heinous manner, I think the death penalty should be applied equally. If you're a police officer or a teacher or somebody who works in a factory.
You know all the arguments against the death penalty, and you've probably heard them all by now. That A, it's immoral, that a government shouldn't be involved in taking someone's life, that it's not a deterrent, and that it ends up costing too much because of the amount of money in appeals. Right. Do any of those move you?
They're valid. They're arguments. People are very passionate about their side of the argument. My stance on it is a deterrent. If it wasn't a deterrent, then when somebody's is sentenced at the death penalty, they wouldn't be fighting so hard to have that overturned and to keep their life.
So it's not a deterrent to the crime?
I think it is a deterrent. I think that there are some people that think of the penalty of the crime that they're about ready to commit and possibly not commit it.
And what about the cost?
Cost, maybe it does cost a little bit more, but it is a sentence that is imposed on somebody that commits a very heinous crime.
And Chad Spicer's family, you've been in contact with them?
Oh, yeah.
And they're involved in this? Are they supportive?
Yes, absolutely.
What was their reaction after his death penalty was vacated?
Heartbroken. They wanted to see the ultimate justice served for their son's death.
Because there is an argument that's made by opponents to the death penalty that it's actually harder for the families having to go through the process of the death penalty and all of the appeals in situations like this than if they're put away forever and they're just forgotten.
Even if they're put away and forgotten, a lot of them still will file appeals. Will still try to, to get their sentences reduced. Try to find technicalities, in their original case and their sentencing that might reduce or vacate their sentence. So it doesn't completely eliminate it. They're using that and as an argument, but I don't think that it would really pass the test if you looked at previous cases, people that were sentenced to life in prison, they don't just go away quietly. You know, they still file appeals. They still are trying to get their sentences reduced. They're still trying to get out of prison earlier than when they would have.
How much support do you have for this legislation in the Senate?
The death penalty repeal actually passed the Senate the last two General Assemblies. There has been some changes in the General Assembly since then, possibly with the change in the General Assembly that could be coming up at the end of February, beginning of March timeframe. We might be able to get death penalty back on the books again.
And do you know, well, wait a second, do you know where the incoming governor stands on it?
No, not necessarily. Not necessarily. But you know, the death penalty in Delaware has been repealed before. There was a heinous crime committed and it was put back on the books, but the veto was overridden. So, you know, really it's the will of the people. If there is a heinous murder that's committed, you know, people demand the justice.
Do you plan on finding out what the governor will or will not do if the legislation reaches his desk before you start with this?
We should go down the road of getting this legislation passed and then let the governor decide what he wants to do.
Okay, you have an interesting situation, if I may go to another topic for a second, in the Senate, in that you have 10 Republicans and you have 10 Democrats. For the first time in a long time, the Republicans have a shot at taking control of the Senate.
Over 40 years.
Now tell me what that would mean.
What that would mean would be, for me, that would be balance in the General Assembly. For many, many years, there had been balance. The House was controlled by the Republicans. The Senate was controlled by the Democrats. Everybody lost something, everybody gained something. But since it's been a one-party rule in the General Assembly for the last 8 years, one party has really been able to make a lot of changes on their own without that give and take.
And you felt like in the past you didn't have a seat at the table?
No, no. You know, when the Democrats had a majority that they could pass tax increases on their own, they did it. A lot of times it was strictly along party lines. Here recently, that we were able to increase the fees for the Division of Motor Vehicles. Well, in order for them to get one of our votes that they needed, we did the first leg of a constitutional amendment for the lockbox, so that Transportation Trust Fund was protected and not raided for operating expenses. So those are the types of things, those are the type of leverage that are really important to form that good public policy, whether it's a strong minority or two parties that the two parties that are in a majority.
Now, this is a special election that's going to be held, we don't know when, probably late February, maybe early March, to fill the seat that was once held by Bethany Ho Long.
Right.
Since she's now Lieutenant Governor, it's going to be in Middletown, it's going to be fascinating. Are you going to be involved?
I am involved now, yes.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I appreciate you being here,
Sure
Senator
thing.
Brian Pettyjohn. When we come back, you might get whiplash from this switch. John Kowalka is coming in, representative, to talk about gun legislation in Delaware when the Delaware Wave returns.